Another new one, eh? I could smell it on you. Veterans tend to smell just a little more like despair. You didn't think you were the only one, did you? You should go up north. There's whole cities of exiles up there.
For the most part, those condemned to the Exiled Lands have seen the last of civilization. Their lives will be consumed by a savage and barbarous struggle to survive just one more day. But beyond the wretched camps huddled along the banks of the river, at the western edge of the desert, the barren, dusty hills give way to boxy mud houses. Clustered around a life-giving oasis is civilization's last gasp in the wasteland, the city of Sepermeru. How can this place exist in the desolate, exiled lands, where little else remains but sand and ruins? Its secret lies in the fact that it was not built by those who crawled from their crosses. Instead, Sepermeru is the city of the Relic Hunters, a group of ambitious mercenaries hired to scour the wastes for ancient artifacts. What they didn't know when they signed on was that they would end up trapped here, stuck behind the curse wall. Years ago, before he had hit upon the idea of using criminals as disposable labor, the dark wizard Tohamon sent emissaries throughout Stygia to hire scavengers and tomb raiders. Now lord of the Black Ring and puppet master of Stygia, he had no desire to expose himself to any danger, but he coveted the powerful magical treasures of the giant kings. One of the original Relic Hunters wrote a note describing how he was recruited. The notice was under the seal of King Cestiphon himself, calling for adventurers and mercenaries interested in making good gold for little work to meet at the central plaza in Kemi. I was out of work and out of coin, and there was nothing odd about the notice. Every so often the bandits who haunt the desert highways grow too bold, and the king hires a small army of ruffians to scare them back into their hideouts for a while. It's boring work out in the desert, with nary a whore or tavern in sight, but it pays well, and bandits are more interested in running away from overwhelming odds than fighting, so your chances of coming back again are pretty good. Better than any war I've ever fought in. In any case, I thought this would be the same thing. It wasn't. Quite a few of us gathered at the muster in the square, mostly Stygian, of course, but there were a few freebooters from the northern lands. They stood in their own little group, some distance from the rest of us, looking uneasy. The royal guards showed up and cleared a space in the center of the square for the royal herald. "We're looking for treasure hunters," he announced, looking around the square at the assorted scum that the summons had gathered. "We've discovered the ruins of an ancient city, and we need those souls brave enough to travel into the ruins and recover all of the treasures found therein. For every treasure that you recover, you will be paid a sum of gold. The ruins are, as far as we can tell, uninhabited. Because we don't want the whereabouts of these ruins and the treasure to become common knowledge, if you agree to join us, there are 3 conditions. First, you will be blindfolded and transported by wagon to the ruins. Second, you will not be allowed to have contact with anybody outside of the ruins while you're there. And finally, you will wear one of these." He was holding up a golden bracelet, which glinted with a green jewel. I was too far away to make out much detail, but I remember thinking immediately that the price of the bracelet, if it was real, was worth taking the job for anyway. "What's the trick?" a burly, leather-clad man holding a fearsome-looking maul demanded. I agreed. Something was not right here. This all sounded far too good to be true. "The trick," said a black-robed man, pushing past the royal herald to confront the mercenary who had shouted, "is really very simple." He lifted an arm, and it was clear that he was holding a golden bracelet exactly like the one that the herald had been holding a moment before. If you try to keep anything you find in the ruins, or you run away from the ruins with the thought that you might sell this bracelet, you will be punished. The man in the black robe flicked his hand, and it wasn't a golden bracelet he was holding, but a small golden snake with glittering green eyes. He threw it full in the face of the burly mercenary. The man shrieked and clawed at his face, but it was far too late. He began to convulse, frothing at the mouth and turning a dreadful pale color. He fell to the ground, still twitching. The man in the black robes stepped over the dying man and picked up the glittering snake from the ground. By the time he did, it was simply a bracelet once more. The crowd murmured uneasily. We were used to the priests of Set and their bloody knives, but such a blatant sorcery implied a pact with even darker powers, the type of pact that stains a man's soul in darkness that can never be erased. Now, if our terms are acceptable to you, step forward. The royal herald had stepped forward to talk to the crowd again. The black-robed sorcerer had withdrawn behind the guards. About half of the crowd moved toward the herald immediately, eager for the adventure. Quite a few people left immediately, clearly disquieted by the demonstration of power that they had seen. I lingered. I'm not a superstitious man, but I knew there were things beyond my understanding in this world, and I wanted no part of them. On the other hand, my purse was hanging limply at my side, and my lips were parched for lack of strong drink. I should have listened to my instincts, but I chose the path of the fool, and now I am destined to die in the Exiled Lands. Just another exile, lost in the desert.
It seems that the relics are the entire point of this whole exercise. Whoever or whatever it was that built the ruins, it's them that the people who created this place are interested in. We're just here to be cheap labor.
It was only after they arrived that the Relic Hunters discovered the true purpose of the bracelets, trapping them behind the curse wall. Every so often, Stygian soldiers would arrive in a great purge, taking any artifacts the scavengers had found by force. As more and more mercenaries disappeared from the civilized world, never to return, the number of them willing to risk taking up Tochamon's offer dwindled to none. It was then that he began using condemned criminals. But not all of the Relic Hunters died. Many of these hardened fighters banded together, carving out a corner of the Exiled Lands and building the city of Sepermeru.
Good day, noble adventurer. I am Gilzan, treasure hunter and man of fortune. If you are planning to wander the avenues of this cursed city, then perhaps I can offer some advice. No charge the first time.
While the twisting streets of Set City, as it is also known, are safe compared to the surrounding wilderness, they hold their share of dangers for the unwary. Bandits lurk in its back alleys, making their living by mugging passers-by. Slave-takers haunt the savannah north of the city, hawking their wares to those grown rich on the gold of the giant kings, and they are not averse to adding lost travelers to their selection. Given half a chance, every merchant will cheat you. Still, it is perhaps the only place in the Exiled Lands where newcomers aren't attacked on sight.
It has been good for me to be here. I have been able to rest and relax. The Exiled Lands are a fearsome place, but the people here have managed to build something.
Sepermeru is divided into 4 districts. The first is South Lake, site of the southern gate. Many residents of the city make their homes here, living in squat, boxy mud houses that stay insulated against the punishing heat of the desert. The area is built around a small pool, which helps to keep the days cool. Nearby is the Temple Quarter, where the influence of Stygia is clearly felt. The Temple of Set, the Great Serpent, is full of those praying for his dark protection. Uptown of South Lake is Westwall, the city's merchant district. Countless traders hawk their wares here, often bartering with goods and services rather than the gold and silver valued in the outside world. The people of the Exiled Lands have limited use for hard currency. Westwall also hosts the city prison, which melds seamlessly with the slave market. Punishment of crimes by death is rare because it's wasteful. Instead, the trade in human beings thrives. The final district, perched at the edge of a series of small interconnected lakes, is called Waterside. This is the entertainment district, filled with taverns, brothels, and wine merchants. The corruption brought on by the ancient sorceries that ruined this land weighs heavily on the soul, but the alluring dancers here can take one's mind off of it for a while. It would not pass for quality anywhere else, but among the exiles, it rates as luxurious.
I'll be here a while. This wine tastes like boiled camel's piss and the bread's half weevil, but I'm comfortable enough.
Bandits and slave takers, merchants and whores, many of Sepermeru's people have adapted to their exile. With no hope of escape, they have carved out the most comfortable lives possible for themselves, rising to become citizens or even minor lords of this petty realm at the world's edge. But not all of the mercenaries are content to accept their banishment. Some of them are still treasure seekers, determined to find artifacts that will see them freed from the Exiled Lands.
That's what gives us an opportunity. If you can figure out what they're looking for, and you can find it first, and you can defend it from the Purge, well, then you'll have the biggest bargaining chip of all, and then you can make a great deal.
Many of the treasure seekers have set up camps in the ruins of the unnamed city, once the Giant King's capital. They viciously defend their claims, fighting to ensure that only they can seize the relics that they believe will allow them to bargain for their release. Among the terrifying undead creatures and bat fiends of the ruins, they hold their own. Some whisper that they have been tainted by the city, and the same treasure seekers rise again and again from the grave. More recently, artifacts were discovered closer to home. Deep beneath the wine cellar of the Waterside Tavern, the Relic Hunters discovered a system of caverns filled with ruins much different from those of the Giant Kings. Although they are far younger than the ancient structures of the Giant Kings and Lemurians, they are intimately tied to the story of both. These ruins were built by the Kari, whose persecution drove the Lemurians into Giant King lands. After the cataclysm that sank Lemuria, the surviving Lemurians landed on the shores of the Kari Empire, which ruled what is now Zitai in the far east. While a few escaped to the west, guided by the Witch Queen, most of them became slaves of the Kari, oppressed for over 1,000 years. But such horrific deeds had consequences. In time, the Kari grew decadent, and the slaves rose up to topple their masters. The Kari Empire fell. The Lemurian slaves, free at last to leave the land of their captivity, melded over time with the people of the distant mountains that divide Zitai from the west. Their descendants became the Hyrcanians, feared marauders of the eastern steppes, and the Turanians, whose rich empire was carved out by a powerful Hyrcanian Khan. For their part, the Kari fled west just as the Witch Queen had done, seeking new lands to rule. Eventually, the Kari arrived in the lands of the Giant Kings, long after the war between that elder race and the Lemurians had destroyed them both. They conquered what remained, forging a new kingdom from the ashes. This was the beginning of Stygia. Wars were waged between Stygia and Acheron, south and north, over territory and dominance. And while Acheron eventually fell to barbarians, Stygia survived to become the realm of Set. The Kari city beneath Sepermeru's wine cellar, however, did not last to become part of Stygia. Instead, it met with a grim fate. It collapsed into the caverns below, killing most of its population. The desperate inhabitants, trapped without food beneath the earth and feeling abandoned by Set, turned to a dark ritual to summon a new god. Instead, their magics called up a terrible demon who slaughtered them and transformed them into undead minions for all eternity. Now this once vibrant city is just another haunted ruin for the Relic Hunters of Sepermeru to pick over. Like vultures stripping a corpse, they hungrily ravage the ashes of the past, always seeking the treasure they believe will allow them to strike a bargain to bring them home.